This is Knoydart, and I'm here with David Craig. David's a keen walker and climber. He's also Britain's first and only professor of creative writing, and a fine poet. This is his first visit here.
I've never been here before. It's just been calling me on the map and the history books for years and years and years. You know, you have a kind of agenda. You never get it, but well, I've got it at last.
The cuckoo again?
That's my first of the year. Yeah, fancy it.
Well,
Winging its way to this spot.
Yeah.
David Craig's best known for his work on a particularly unsavoury chapter in British history. For years he's been travelling throughout Scotland and Canada, meeting the descendants of families who were forcibly evicted during the Highland Clearances. The people of Knoydart were right at the heart of that dramatic upheaval.
It was such a great kind of den of resistance in 1745. You know, not that I'm so Jacobite, but just nice thinking there was somebody to resist government, whatever the motive.
This, of course, is where the tarmac stops.
Yeah.
The path starts proper.
The only way to explore Knoydart is by foot. We're travelling some 30 miles, heading westwards from Kinlochhourn and over the mountain summit of Ladhar Bheinn. Then we'll join the Manbarrowsdale track for a final section that leads to the village of Inverie.
It's like walking back into the past. You know, we wish we could get back before civilization, and we can pretend that for a few hours in a place like this. I don't want to walk on tarmac all my life, where you absolutely know you're safe and that every footfall will be the same as the last 1,000 footfalls. You know, might as well not have legs as walk about in the pavement.
It's quite a tremendous landscape, isn't it? This mix of mountain and sea.
But it's so shapely, it's the way it's folded. You can kind of feel the crushing and the folding of the Earth's surface, and what it results in is sheer beauty. It's not a plain. I can't bear a plain.
Here we are, David. We've just come to the first settlement. Scary.
That is scary, is it?
Scary, yeah.
Oh, well.
You've been to see some of the ruins?
Yeah. That's a name to me in the whole sequence I've thought of for years. Scary, Ira, Inverie, and all those, because they nearly all gave witnesses to the testimonies when they were inquiring into what happened in the 19th century. You can just about see that west wall tapering up to a gable, and there's a window. It's where the cattle have gone in and out, anyway, as well as the people.
Yeah.
And I dare say, if you dug down there, you wouldn't even find a threshold, because it would have been an earth floor.
Give us an idea, David, what it would have been like living in a house like this, sharing it virtually with the cattle.
Yeah, lots of stink and lots of flies. That must be the case, and you've taken that for granted. I once asked a man in South Uist, what do you do when the smoke wasn't draining efficiently? It built up to the ceiling and then came down, down, down. He said, oh, we just stooped lower as the evening went on.
So they're all
we couldn't stand it. We couldn't stand it.
Look at that view from the window. It's very fine, isn't it?
Yeah. Mind you, that sort of window always brings to mind Sorley MacLean's lovely lines. I think it's at the start of Hallig. The window is nailed and boarded, through which I saw the west. Lovely. And that's the closure of the vista for the Highland people that came with the clearances. I guess, you know, humans were doomed to leave these places. It's just the way they were forced out was so cruel.
You obviously have a deep interest for the history of these crofting people. Where did all that start?
I couldn't put a year to it even. As soon as my ears were hearing anything, they heard grown-ups in my family talking about castles and battles, because my uncle was a big archaeology man, Douglas Simpson, who dug up lots of the lovely baronial castles. And then my father, his brother-in-law, used to go with him in digs. But it seemed a bit unreal. People with swords and armour. And then I began to hanker to learn about what I call real history, recent history, with coming of industry and steam and whatnot. And then you begin to see all these deserted villages around the fringes, and you think, why did they all leave? You know, in England you might see the highest farm up the Dale had been abandoned because it was too cold and too far away from the bright lights. But in the Highlands you get a whole village all cleared.
Now, when we get up here, you might just get a nice view of Ladhar Bheinn.
From here. Oh, Cameron, look at
There you
that.
go. The Fox Mountain.
Look at the sharpness of it. It's just a total gem. It's a great sculpture. It seems to have a corniced ridge still on top of Snow Ridge.
I see that, yeah.
After 8 miles, we reach Barrisdale Bay. This was once a focus for a thriving community in Knoydart, but now there are only echoes of the past.
And here we are, the graves. The graves, and there's not much left of them, is there?
Yes, there's little flat stones.
Yes, they are. No inscriptions.
It's enough in a way, isn't it? It's unmistakable. Thin wafers of stone are never set up for anything else, are they?
It says a lot too, doesn't it?
Yes.
You know, the fact that they are so thin, so haphazard almost.
You can see why they'd have an islet like this too, because they couldn't croft here.
Yeah.
And they couldn't be wasting ground, could they?
We've stopped among the gravestones, well aware of the history of the place.
The factors came with their men and pulled the thatches off. What would happen to the people? Presumably they didn't go straight out to the awaiting transportation ships.
Well, some did. Often they'd undertaken to go in advance, maybe been paid passage money or been paid an allowance of meal, because remember it was done after the starvation of the year the potato rotted in 1846. So they were semi-starved, and sometimes they got an allowance of meal if they signed to go overseas. Then when the moment of embarkation came, they might refuse to go, but they couldn't change their minds, and then they would go down to the waiting ships. Or they would run off into the moors and sometimes be hounded. Sometimes a whole community would go meekly, at other times there'd be a few resistors, just according to the nature of the leading lights in the village, I suppose, and whether they had the spunk to resist or whether they knuckled under.
Today there are only about 60 people living in Knoydart, mostly crofters, fishermen and estate workers.
Now listen, we'll give you a choice tonight. We can either stay in the bothy, or I've brought a tent. We can camp out in the grass here.
We'll be mad to go indoors when we can be outdoors. We came here to be outdoors.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
We'll camp.
It's good thinking.
Let's go.
Why are there mussels in the barn?
Mussels everywhere.
Yeah.
Deer over there, see them?
Oh, beautiful.
Aye.
Really like the cattle of the country, aren't they?
Aren't they?
I'm leaving to you. Just tell me when you want me to do anything.
All right. Tell you what you could do. If you go into the side pockets of the rucksack, you'll find the stove.
This is state-of-the-art.
It's a state of that
Cameron.
stove.
You know, compared with the old stoves, it looks like a part of an intercontinental ballistic missile or something.
Now, one very important question at this stage. Are you a snorer?
Not usually.
All right, if you said
I'm
yes, then
told.
I might have gone to the bothy.
Unless my wife just keeps humouring me.
We'll get a brew shortly, hopefully. You burn your fingers?
Well, not terminally.
We've now completed about a third of our walk. A lot of walkers are happy to stop here and simply enjoy the crags and the atmosphere, but we wanted to press on, despite the change in the weather.
One of the best bits of advice I ever got was from a marvellous crazy man called Davy Glenn. And he said, on a wet day, never heed, just walk straight into the first puddle you come to, and then you'll never mind for the whole of the rest of the day.
There's sense in that, I guess. Do you ever think, David, that we try far too hard to go into the whys and wherefores of why we come out here?
I guess so. I think the mountain writing, the outdoor writing I like, is right, and it revels in the place itself, and is just like saturated with the greenness of grass, you know, and the wetness of a bog and the grain of stone. I think it should be revelled in, not analysed.
David's passion for the mountains began as a teenager and has continued undiminished for over 50 years. He believes we all have a moral right to walk hills like these, and nothing should interfere with that.
I've met very few landowners. I've met a landowner once, which was in Harris, and we'd rung and rung the castle for permission, and we got fed up with being put off in the end. So we motored up there, and we were putting on our anoraks the side of the road, when a Land Rover drew up, and then an arm clad in tweed shot out the driver's window and crooked the finger at me like that, which I'd only seen in 18th century cartoons before that point. And this boy said, "And what are you doing?" And we bickered on for a while, and obviously this was the laird. Yeah. And he explained that his shooters were in the hill that day. "No, we're shooting on my hill today, you can't go there."
My hill?
My hill. I was dead tactful for me for a while. In the end, when it was obvious tact was getting me nowhere, I finally said, "It just seems weird to me that anybody can own a mountain or own a river or own a moor." And he said, "Oh, you sound like a communist," and so drove off in a thick blue cloud of high dudgeon.
And he was absolutely right, of course.
Hereward the Wake from Rutland.
So how has all that influenced your attitudes towards landowners generally? When you come on a mountain like this, do you feel that perhaps you're walking in someone else's property, or do you feel very much this is as much yours as anybody else's?
Oh, you know, it's just continuous nature, you know, and it's our land, so I bristle if I see a fence or a notice.
You're no stranger to controversy, are you?
I don't want controversy anymore. I just want to wander about in the mountains nowadays.
David Craig seems to have a compulsion to dig around, searching out new evidence of the crofters' lives. The Ordnance Survey map suggests there could be something worth finding in Corridorchel, shillings, temporary summer homes used by the crofters' families. The chance to find them really is too good to miss.
It can't be hereabouts because it's too hummocky to make a house. I believe the houses tend to be a circle of stones for a foundation, and then poles and sods over the top of them. So it's like a wigwam, if you will, yes, or a teepee.
Yeah.
This is too wet to live in, isn't it? And that's very green. That's the greenest bit for miles around. So well, it could mean that that's where the animals were. So there's more dung put in the ground than normal.
Fertilizer.
Fertilizer. And a lot of the old settlements in Sutherland, they still look green, although the people were burnt out 150 years ago. And the sheep tend to seek out the old ground that was used. Mm-hmm. So the greenness may be a clue. It seemed to me that people with as good memories as the Highland people have might have the very words or images that their great-grandfathers and mothers had passed down to them. The stories of the clearances, so you would get the eyewitness account in words that were transmitted. Like Alistair McKinnon, the postman at Sassig and Skye, said to me that his grandmother was often told by her mother that on the night of the clearance, when they walked 7 pathless miles to a new place to sit down for the night, she shed more tears than she drew milk from the cows. So you have a sentence that epitomizes the clearance at the moment when it happened. And the family have never lost it because it grieved them so much and it cut so deep. Cameron?
What's this? You found something?
That looks level.
Yeah?
That's not natural, is it? Why should this knoll be level? That looks like a wall to me.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Look.
It's a wall.
Success.
It is success.
Success. You're right. Look.
The front wall.
Yeah. Maybe
the door. The surround there. Here's a corner, a rounded corner, like in the style of the old houses.
Yeah. So there'd be a circle like this, and there'd be almost a tapey of what?
A sort of squashy oblong circle. Yeah. It was the right shape.
Well, Professor Craig, I think you've entered your mountain. Let's go and climb it, will we?
We can't quite prove it, but that doesn't matter.
No, that's good.
From the lower grassy slopes of Corridorchel, a long and bumpy ridge carries us about 3,000 feet, close to the summit of Larvin. It's a long, steady pull, but every foot of the way brings its own reward.
right along where we've come. Look at all the indentations.
Nearly a mirror image down here.
Lovely, isn't it? Look at the colours. The greens, further you go inshore, all the ripples.
Oh, the greens are getting spotlit by sheer luck. It makes it look like the promised land or something, doesn't it?
Well,
That's what I think the promised land looked like.
Promised land's up here. I must admit,
Promised land's everywhere.
I'm glad to get away from the paths and the tracks and get onto the rough stuff. Summits are what it's all about for me, David. I like to get onto the high tops.
In the Highlands, there's always another one. That's the beauty of it. There are enough mountains. The English lakes are too compact. You can't lose yourself in the English lakes.
Nearly there, David.
Yep.
We're up here. Well, I got up here over this, and there's a nice big wide sweep of a saddle, which I think you'll enjoy.
We must be getting near that continuous snow we saw from below. It looked as though it had a cornice on it.
Perhaps just once in the course of a day, the mist will lift like a curtain, and you'll get a great panorama, and then it'll close in again. But that moment sticks with you.
It does. It sticks with you forever. My best image like that is Leach, when I've been walking on the ridge of Leach in Turden for 4 hours, just in a cell of grey wool, seeing nothing. And suddenly it stripped away in the afternoon. The rug was torn away and you saw red earth and red rock and green grass. You saw colour again.
Here's our summit. Wow. See, we have two summits here, and I've got to confess to you, David, I'm not quite sure which is the true summit. I guess the thing to do if you're ticking them off is to do them all.
You'd want to anyway, don't you? You just want to loop along from peak to peak. And then when you look back on it, you feel you bounded from peak to peak, and you forget the nice work of toiling down and toiling up. I like to look at the snow.
Yeah. Just don't go too close.
It's only a gradual slope.
Yes, it's not bad, is it? It's not bad. Well, this summit is around about 1,020 metres. I'm afraid I can't
Doesn't
quite...
mean much to me.
I'm not sure what it is in real money.
We'll go over the next top.
At 3,346 feet, Ladhar is the most westerly of all Scotland's mainland Munros, and is the best vantage point in the whole of Knoydart.
Well, this is the forked mountain, David. Ladhar.
Yeah. Right.
Our route goes back down along the ridge, right down over all those humps and bumps.
It looked a good natural route on the map. It also looked about 1/8 of the size. The map shrinks it all into a handy little pattern, but from here it's vast. It almost looks like a single stone snake or something throwing off tendrils and frills in all directions, because it's endless.
And then there's other two Munros. Mailbuie, which is easy, the rounded yellow hill. But the other one's interesting, Lunavon. Some people think it means hill of mirth. Others say it's hill of anger. Others say it's hill of sorrow. And a Gaelic friend of mine once described it as the hill of mixed emotions.
Too abstract. But
well, there's maybe some truth in it. Hill of mixed emotions.
We've still 10 miles to go. From Ladhar we plan to make our way southeast to join the Mambarasdale track, and then westwards to Knoydart's only village, Inverie and Loch Nevis.
the division of this little bit of our world into two is extraordinary, isn't it?
Isn't it?
The winter and spring, yellow, green and white.
Yeah.
It's just beautifully split along the ridge.
As we travel through this landscape, the conversation keeps coming back to the clearances, and one particular question is puzzling me. Why has David been so obsessed with tracing the descendants of these evicted Highlanders, and why was it so important to him to hear their story?
Partly wanting their own words not to die, because, you know, very good words should be handed on. Like, my heart was breaking when I threw out my two into the deep sea. That's a man who lost both his children to measles when he was on board ship going to Australia because he'd been evicted. You just get these piercing moments when it's like hearing the vibration in your ear from a telephone connected with somebody who was alive 160 years ago. Somebody you'll never meet, and somebody who didn't change the world, but that shows they were alive.
You see the cairns of Lord Brocket from here. Way down the end of the loch.
All right.
It's quite a substantial looking thing.
Traditionally, the ownership of Knoydart has been a turbulent one, and Lord Brocket's tenure in the 30s is a particularly unsavoury chapter.
He was obviously, I think quite often, very, very rude to people. He apparently would see someone walk along the road smoking, he would stop them and say, "Put that cigarette out," or "Put down that pipe."
My man.
My man. And people began to get very uncomfortable.
Looks like good Aberdeen granite. Very expensive the way it's carved, eh?
This memorial was placed here by Ronald, 2nd Lord Brocket of Knoydart, in gratitude for his father and mother, and his wife and children, AD 1938.
And his dog, no doubt. And his peasants.
Oh, well, I'm not so sure about the peasants. He didn't like people.
So it's a strange notion. It's not memorial to Brocket. It's Brocket's memorial to everybody, his whole little group,
Yeah.
his buddies.
Yes, it stinks to me of egoism. But I want to take you down and show you another memorial. I think it's much, much better memorial.
So where are we off now?
And it has to do
down
with
the road.
Brocket. Down the road, down through the trees into Inverie.
Okay.
And this is a memorial to the 7 Men of Knoydart who stood against Brocket. He was also a Nazi sympathiser.
Brocket was?
Yeah. Yes,
Here?
he was a big friend of Ribbentrop. He actually met Adolf Hitler and was a member of the Anglo-German Association prior to the war.
I suppose Hitler liked to acquire a few people with Lord in front of their name to make his scoundrelly regime look good. So here's the story of the 7 men.
7 of them decided that they wanted to stake their own claim for their own little bit of crofting land.
The last of the land raids.
Land raids are uniquely Scottish, the Highlanders' way of claiming the land they'd worked for generations.
I spoke to the last of the North Uist land raiders, Angus Alec Macaulay, a few years ago. He raided in Pavelsgarry in North Uist in 1920. They came back from the war and they had almost nothing. And what they did was to go down to the estate one day in spring when the estate workers were tipping seaweed onto the farm, seaweeding as they called it. And they told the man, "We've come to overturn your carts because we want to own the land that we fought for." And Angus Alec began sobbing as he told me that. You know, 69 years later, he's remembering it with tears. And he recovered himself and explained how they raided the land and were arrested and sent to jail in Inverness. And when they came back after a month in jail for trespassing on the farm, in effect, they were received, you know, with pipes and with bonfires on the hill, because what they'd done was try and reclaim the land. And it was the same in Knoydart. Apparently, under the new Crofters Landholding Acts that had applied since 1886, it should have been possible for the land that they claimed here in Knoydart to be given to them. But the then Secretary of State in the Labour government, Arthur Woodburn, wouldn't invoke the legislation. So the 7 Men of Knoydart got no help from the law at all.
We'd walked through Knoydart to the coast. Here, opposite Skye, is the deserted village of Doon. On a glorious spring morning, David spoke eloquently of the pain and the anguish that is the people's own history.
The first permanent settlers would have come in here in the 700 and 800, and since then they would have inhabited it for 1,200 years until 1853.
Do you feel people will have more of an understanding in the future of what the clearances were all about? I mean, I have heard it described as ethnic cleansing.
It was ethnic cleansing, yeah, because on the whole, people who spoke only English were putting out the Gaelic people. Not because they spoke Gaelic, but that's in effect what was happening. And then having put them, so many of them out, Gaelic was forbidden. This sort of place, it always brings to mind the phrase, a cradle of civilization. You know, a desperately hard, poor civilization, but not one that deserved to end in fire and terror.
Tell me, David, when you were writing your book, what was your sort of sense of emotion at the time? Did it really stir you? Did it really transform your life?
Yes, it did, because, or confirmed what I'd always thought, that change works by terrible suffering. You know, a man who was crippled and had 7 children, including one a month old, he would be forced out of a house like this. They would thrash his hens out through the smoke hole. They would cut the couples, the walls would fall in. The heavies, state goons, would send the spinning wheels and the dairying implements barreling down the hillside. And then these people had to go out and live in a little earth hole, a hole they dug out and put maybe a bit of sailcloth and a bit of burnt timber over it for a roof, and live in like a living grave for at least a winter, and in some cases they lived in tents here for 3 winters. It was a Biafra, it was a Rwanda, or something of that kind. It was just like the worst things in recent African history in our own country.